Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we'll be doing a quick review of King of Fighters 13 running on the Xbox Series X via backwards compatibility. This game of course is available on several online stores as well. And we are on the road to King of Fighters 15, which is now just a scant 10 days away. So looking forward to playing 14 this weekend, doing an overview of that. And of course, we'll be unboxing the King of Fighters 15 PS5 collector's version for the US. And we come to King of Fighters 13 for the Xbox 360. Again, backwards compatible, on played on the Xbox Series X. This is actually not their first high-res 2D KOF game. King of Fighters 11 and of course 12 was published, or I should say, were published and released on the PS2 and the PS3 respectively. It was definitely a gamble by SNK Playmore to release such high-res sprites. There is definitely a lot of work involved to completely redraw a lot of the main characters in the storyline, and of course, having to do all that sprite work. I personally loved them for it. 11 and 12, while good games, were not quite as well balanced as King of Fighters 13 ended up being. And it is unfortunate that King of Fighters 13 just didn't sell as well as SNK Playmore helped. I could only hope and wish to think what it might have looked like, what other type of KOF or other SNK Playmore games we might have received with high res 2D sprite work like this. Um, I do again love the animation, the fluidity, the amount of detail and parallax in the background. I may not agree with some of the way some of the characters are redrawn. So, for example, one of my favorite characters is Joe Higashi, and I will be honest, I am not a huge fan of the way he looks in the King of Fighters 11, 12, and 13 series. Now, King of Fighters 13 originally came out in the arcades. Hard to believe, but it's been 12 years. It was released on July 14th, 2010 in the arcades, and also again released with some edited versions the same year in actually 2012 and in 2013 respectively. It was released of course on the PlayStation 3, the Xbox 360, and of course on Windows as well via Steam. This is the last game in the Tales of Ash series, which of course was started with King of Fighters 11, midway through, of course, with King of Fighters 12, and now finishing up with King of Fighters 13. It is the 13th installment in King of Fighters series, and again, final chapter of the Tales of Ash series. There is even some mobile versions of the game that was released as well, which of course is a little bit hard to play when you're trying to play a fighting game with touch controls. Um, this, of course, is being played, as I mentioned, on the Xbox Series X, which is one of my favorite versions to play. You can still pick it up, of course, for the PS3 online via the PS Network. Unfortunately, it is not backwards compatible, so you can't play it on the PS4 or the PS5. You can, however, pick it up on Steam, and it is fully playable and definitely worth a pickup there as well. Now, of course, this version is the updated version, which did feature some extra characters as well and a couple other modes. There are some new versions of the game, as I mentioned, that was finally released in 2013 as one of the last updates, which was called the King of Fighters 13 Climax Edition. And if you're a fan of the King of Fighters or of Yore, this game by design was meant to really kind of resonate with the King of Fighters fans from the past series, especially unfortunately being one of the last King of Fighters games done in 2D sprites. Of course, high res artwork 2D sprites. They did listen to their fans in regards to the pace, the gameplays, and the control. The game, I think, really surpasses a lot of the high expectations that King of Fighters fans might have had, especially with how King of Fighters 11 and 12 were received. And I think 13 was a great polish. And I can, at this point only imagine what a new version, completely done in high res artwork, in say Garo, Mark of the Wolves, even World Heroes, or even the Art of Fighting series would be with this type of artwork. which unfortunately we probably may not see again just due to the amount of sprite and artwork that would need to be done to have this type of fluid animation. And as this game is the last of the Tales of Ash series, there are of course been some gameplay tweaks as well. Every character's special moves can now have EX special moves, very much akin to Street Fighter 3 or of course Darkstalkers for some of you Capcom fans out there, myself included. There's even EX moves which can kind of combo or log in slash or even cancel to other moves as well. The feature that, and they call that feature the drive cancel. It does basically, you can almost unlimitedly cancel any move into another move. It does require the hyper drive gauge, which is that small gauge right above the power gauge as well. The hyperdrive mode, also known as HD mode, it's a little tricky, and can be done once that gauge is at maximum. From there, you can perform an almost unlimited amount of drive cancels right when that gauge is full. It is kind of a short lifespan on that gauge, so you do have to kind of plan in advance. So you'll definitely be visiting the training mode of the game to get used to those as well. There's also other things that they introduced from the older series, like King of Fighters 2002, such as the free cancel and of course the max activation move. And also, while in hyperdrive mode, and if you do have two power stocks available, you can also even do it with three power stocks. You can enter a Neomax super special move, and which is of course was introduced in King of Fighters Neo Wave, and was also in the 2002 Unlimited match. Now, not every character has one, um, but it is quite amazing to see for the ones that do. Throw attacks are of course still included, so it's just forward hard punch or hard kick like in the previous games. Overall, there's about 8 stages, and of course, 2 extra stages saved for the final matches with bosses and sub boss. The zoom effect, which was available on the PS3 versions of King of Fighters 12, were greatly removed, and the pacing and the overall speed of the gameplay has been improved and better balanced. The things that you do see as far as pre-fight exchanges between each and every character are still personalized and there as well. A lot of the King of Fighters of old, and even a lot of the Capcom characters, of which they've done that as well. And there are, of course, a couple additions in regards to the character roster, like Raiden from the Fatal Fury series now appears, Hua Jai, also from Fatal Fury, Psyche, who is both the sub boss and almost the funny boss, depending on how well you do. There will be Evil Ash as the actual final boss in the game. Mr. Karate is also included as well. As far as the team roster itself, you do have the Rivals team, which is consists of Elizabeth, Duolon, and Shenwu. The Japan team returns with Kyo Kusanagi, Benimaru Nikaido, and Goro Diamond. No changes to the Fatal Fury team, which is still Terry Bogard, Andy Bogard, and Joe Higashi. The Art of Fighting team still return with Ryo Sakazaki, Robert Garcia, and Takuma Sakazaki. Ikari Warriors team with no changes with Leona Hydern, Ralph Jones, and Clark Still. The Psycho Soldier team is still Athena Asimiya, Sei Kensu, and Shingen Sai. The women's fighting team is still King, Mai Shiranui, and Yuri Sakazaki. Kim Kapuan's team returns with Kim Kapuan, Raiden, and Huajai. The Yagami team includes Your Yagami, Mature, and Vice. And K Dash's team is K Dash, Kula Diamond, and Maxima. Now available in all games, of course, is Ash Crimson. And then in the domestic arcade games and the Climax arcade games, you do have Psyche in his human form, and Billy Kane is included as well. And then for the home console versions, you can download extra characters like the Kyo Kusanagi from the NES style, and also Yori, who does get his flames back based on his King of Fighters 95 through KOF 11 moveset. Mr. Karate, which is in his serious form where he does have the mask, is also back as well. And as far as the stages, you've got Matsumoto, Japan, which takes place in a sumo wrestler ring in front, right next to the Miyajima Shrine. Of course, the Matsumoto Castle and Mount Fuji is viewable as well. The other stage is in Agra, India, which is in the city of Agra, taking place during sunset marks by 3D elephants in the background. And London, England is one of the next stage for Britain, with Big Ben in the background as well. Then you've got the Amazon forest in Brazil, New York City in the US, also showing some King of Fighters and also some speakers, monitors, and some of your actual gameplay is shown in those smaller monitors as well. As far as the ending stages, you do have the Sky Noah, which was included in King of 2003, and also Hegra, Saudi Arabia, which has the ancient ruins, Kokendryu Dojo in Southtown from Art of Fighting 2, the Pow Pow Cafe from Southtown from the Fatal Fury series. You have an alley from Southtown as well. Burnt Remnants near a European castle, Mr. Karate's Temple from the Art of Fighting, the Abandoned Factory stage from King of Fighters 95, and the Osaka Passageway from Osaka, Japan from King of Fighters 96. The mid-boss and boss stage includes the Coliseum Rooftop for Ash Crimson, and the Clock Tower in London, England for Billy. You also have the Vessel Room stage for the human version of the Psyche form. Of course, the Rose Stadium, the Gate version with Awakened Psyche, and of course the Rose Stadium all completely misted with Evil Ash. And with that out of the way, the next part is the summary for all the main pieces: graphics, gameplay, replayability, sound, and overall. So, as far as graphics, this game has really aged very well in the 12 years since it's been released. The sharp, high res, captured 2D sprites and backgrounds are second to none. They're even, of course, of higher res and animation quality, I think, even compared to Street Fighter 3, Third Strike series, Double Impact, or the new Challengers. The only game I think that looks better would be Arc System's Guilty Gear Strive. And if that's where eventually some of the SNK Playmore games may end up going, into that Guilty Gear Strive where it's 3D animated but shown in a 2D fashion, I definitely wouldn't mind. Now, the next game coming up, the King of Fighters 14, which will be this weekend, takes place with more 3D graphics, still with a 2.5D gameplay. However, I don't think it just looks as good as King of Fighters 13. I really love the high res 2D sprite work. Smooth animation, tons of little details everywhere, a lot of Easter eggs, especially if you finish an opponent with a special move. A lot of times they can show extra bruises or even their clothes kind of bursting, depending on which character you're doing a special move to. They also did a lot of wonderful little Easter eggs and nods. Besides being able to custom color your character, there's also little custom colors pre-made by the SNK Playmore teams. So there's even Dragon Ball colored versions of characters, etc. So I do love all the little kind of nods that they placed. And the fact that he also took time to really invest each stage with life. The backgrounds themselves are very busy, frenetic, and kinetic in a good way. Which I think this is why this game, I double dipped. I have got it on Xbox online for my Xbox Series X, and I even bought it for Steam when I want to play it on the go. And of course, with the upcoming Steam Deck, I'm definitely looking forward to be able to hopefully play King of Fighters 13 everywhere. Since Street Fighter 5 is playable on the Steam Deck, I'm hoping King of Fighters 13 will follow suit. And for King of Fighters 13 gameplay, it is definitely spot on. The control, the gameplay, the game mechanics itself is a lot of fun while still harkening back to a lot of the move sets and muscle memories that if you are a King of Fighters mainstay that you would have of yore. So it's definitely a huge fan. It's a fan service game for the King of Fighters community, and I'm glad that by design this game was developed as such. It is definitely a love letter from SNK to the fans, and I'm glad that while with this as their last at least for now, high res 2D game. Again, completely 2D as far as the character animations and the sprite work. Um, unless they turn around and go this route again, this is, of course, the last high res 2D game that they've produced. And I'm glad they kept the gameplay just as tight and you're not waiting for superfluous or extra frames of animation to combo in or cash your moves to the next step. The wonderful thing is again is that cancel, being able to cancel from one move to another, whether that be a special, an EX special, or a desperation move. It really adds some forethought and some kinetic action to the gameplay. Sometimes you just can't pre-plan what you want to do next, and I do love that. Completely on point. I know I didn't mention it in my last part audio piece, but if for me graphics were a 10, gameplay is a 10 as well. Now when it comes to sound, the voices, still a very solid 9. And I'm only giving it a 9 because there aren't quite as many songs that really speak to me. This is definitely one of the better games with a good soundtrack still, so don't get me wrong. But definitely not as a singular game, uh, that one that has all the best soundtracks from the previous series. That said, the tracks that are here are very evocative. They definitely fit the action very well and very easy to to listen to and get you pumped up. The voices themselves are very well done. They're high res. Of course, they're no longer using the MVS or AS hardware, so there's nary a scratch or a tinny voice or sound effect inside. Now, when it comes to overall replayability, I would say this game is a solid 8. I think with a lot of the different move sets, the timing, and you can definitely spend quite a few years just learning this game and then trying to learn the different matchups that you can go up against. So for me, it's a gameplay. The gameplay itself still on point. Um, is there a gameplay that's a 10 out of 10? Honestly, I haven't found one yet as far as the replayability gameplay factor, where you can, at least for a 2D fighter. I will say probably one of the closest 2D action slash fighting games that comes close in regards to being infinitely almost replayable would be the Streets of Rage 4 series, especially once they added in the kind of almost rogue-like mode where a lot of the enemies and stages can get randomized. Now, can you imagine if that was done in a 2D fighting game? Where you would have extra modes and you would face extra characters that would have modifiers to them that you can pretty much play almost forever and not get tired and not really know what to expect. So that would be interesting if a fighting company does decide to do that in the future. And last but not least, we come up to the final summary. Overall, I think this game is a solid 9.5 out of 10. And I could be biased. This is definitely still one of my favorite King of Fighters game that isn't a dream match. If I had to rank it in order, 96 still holds a special place in my heart, again, just because of the year itself of 1996. Next to that would be King of Fighters 98, and then King of Fighters 2002 Ultimate Match, and then King of Fighters 2003. So definitely up there. Now, if I had to compare King of Fighters 2003 to 96 without that tinge of nostalgia and what the 1996 signifies to me, 2003, of course, is the better game, but King of Fighters 96 still has a better soundtrack. Overall, if you can't pick this up or want to pick this up and you're a King of Fighters, either if you're a newbie or a longtime fan, definitely recommend picking it up on the Xbox since it is fully backwards compatible. And at least it seems in the long run, Microsoft will keep that backwards compatibility. This game has been backwards compatible. Of course, it's been released in the 360 physically, and then of course available digitally, which was then playable on the Xbox One, the Xbox Series One, the Xbox Series S, and of course now the X. It is of course fully playable and purchasable on Steam as well. And so with either one of those two versions, you really can't go wrong. and they often have sales. Mainly, I've seen more sales on the Xbox network for this game, playing the backwards compatibility version versus the Steam version. They believe the Steam version right now is $29.99. I believe I got mine when it was on sale for $14.99. So you do see those usually during the end of the year, like right around Christmas or a New Year's sale. And if you do see it, completely pick it up. If you're a fighting game fan, especially if you love 2D goodness, this is definitely a wonderful, wonderful game to pick up. And with that, next weekend, I'll be uploading King of Fighters 14 as we are under 2 weeks away from King of Fighters 15 launch. And 14 was actually pretty decent. You'll get to hear more of my overview and thoughts in that review, and also see some of the videos as I played as well. And I can't wait, like everybody else, to play King of Fighters 15. I will be capturing it from my PS5 on my OLED TV as well. So I do thank everybody for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and have a wonderful week.